It's easy to miss some of the really complex financial threads running through, well, everything in our society, even places you might not expect.
Absolutely.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into what I think is a truly paradoxical area: U.S. tax law as it applies to undocumented individuals.
It really is fascinating.
Our mission here is to pull out the key insights, basically give you a shortcut to understanding this pretty nuanced topic. Because at its heart, the U.S. tax system says something simple.
Right. The core principle is earn income here, pay taxes here. Doesn't matter about your immigration status for that part.
Exactly. But that's where it starts getting really interesting. How does the system actually make that happen? And maybe more importantly, what are the knock-on effects, the implications? Some are pretty surprising.
Well, a huge piece of this is something the IRS actually created specifically for this situation.
Yeah.
The ITIN, the Individual Taxpayer Identification Number.
Ah, the ITN. Okay.
Yeah, set up back in 1996. It's a 9-digit number, always starts with a 9, and it's purely a tax processing number for people who can't get a Social Security number.
Okay, so just for taxes.
Purely. And here's the paradox you mentioned. Having an ITIN does not give you legal status. It doesn't authorize you to work. It doesn't make you eligible for things like Social Security benefits down the line or the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Right, so it pulls people into the tax system.
Exactly, for collecting revenue. While at the same time, the system keeps them out of many benefits that those same tax dollars are funding. And the scale here is just, well, it's massive.
They're massive. Are we talking?
Just looking at 2015 data, you had something like 4.4 million ITIN filers. And they contributed over, get this, $23.6 billion in total taxes.
Wow, $23 billion. That's
Yeah.
that's a number that really makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
It really shows how significant this is for revenue, even with that tension baked right in. So, okay, for someone needing to do this, how do they actually get one? What's the process?
It usually starts with filing a valid federal income tax return. Along with that, you submit a Form W-7, which is the ITIN application.
And you need proof, right, of who you are.
Yeah, proof of identity and your foreign status. An unexpired foreign passport is a common one. Now, you can mail the original documents.
Oof, mailing your passport sounds a bit nerve-wracking.
It can be, yeah. The IRS does return them. But there's another option. Using a certifying acceptance agent, a CAA. They can look at your documents, verify them, and then you don't have to mail the originals.
Okay, that makes sense. So the system collects billions. There's a clear process.
Mm-hmm.
But you touched on this. For someone without status to volunteer all this info, there has to be some guarantee about privacy, right? How is that handled?
That's maybe the most critical piece for making this whole thing work. It's called Internal Revenue Code, Section 6103.
Section 6103.
Right. And basically, it stops the IRS from sharing taxpayer information with other government agencies. That includes immigration enforcement.
So there's a firewall?
A really important firewall. It's essential for encouraging voluntary compliance. Think about it. Without that protection, why would anyone file? That $23 billion figure, it likely wouldn't exist. People would fear deportation.
Okay, so that firewall allows the system to function, allows the revenue collection. But let's go back to the other side of that paradox, the exclusion part.
Yeah.
Where does that really bite? Is it mainly with benefits and tax credits?
That's where you see it most clearly, yes. The lines are very sharp. Take the Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC. Big credit for working families.
Huge.
ITIN holders are completely ineligible. You need a Social Security number for the filer, for the spouse, for the kids being claimed. Period.
Okay. What about something like the child tax credit?
Ah, that one's more complicated. An ITIN holding parent can claim the CTC, and it's but only for a child who has a work-valid Social Security number.
So a U.S. citizen child, for instance.
Usually, yes. If the child only has an ITIN, they don't qualify for the main CTC. They might qualify for the much smaller, non-refundable credit for other dependents, but it's not nearly the same level of support.
So definitely significant restrictions there, fitting that exclusion pattern. Are there any credits where IDKeyon holders surprisingly do qualify?
Yes, actually, and it's quite notable. Federal education credits. Things like the American Opportunity Tax Credit, the AOTC, or the Lifetime Learning Credit. Generally, ITIN holders are eligible for those if they meet the other requirements.
Huh. That's interesting. Education seems like an outlier there.
It is, and there's another angle, too, beyond just the tax return itself. Having a consistent history of filing taxes, even with an ITIN, that can be really valuable down the road.
How so?
It's often seen as strong positive evidence of good moral character. That's a requirement for many immigration processes, like applying for citizenship later on, or maybe getting certain waivers if you've been in the country unlawfully. Filing taxes shows you respect U.S. law.
So it's almost like a strategic move for the future, demonstrating responsibility.
It can definitely be viewed that way, yeah. But, there's still the day-to-day reality of work.
Right, the employment issue. If you need an SSN to work legally,
Then many undocumented workers, unfortunately, end up using Social Security numbers that aren't theirs, maybe borrowed, maybe fraudulent.
and what happens then? Payroll taxes still get taken out, right?
They do. FICA taxes, Social Security, Medicare get withheld from their paychecks. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Because the SSN isn't validly assigned to them, they never get credit for those contributions towards future benefits.
So they pay in, but they can never collect Social Security based on those earnings.
Never. And all that money,
Yeah.
billions and billions of dollars, it ends up in what the Social Security Administration calls the Earnings Suspense File, the ESF.
It's just suspense file.
Yeah. It's essentially money paid in on mismatched names and numbers.
Ah.
So it effectively ends up subsidizing Social Security and Medicare for everyone else, programs these workers themselves can't access. Again, that paradox.
That is quite something. And this whole system, it's not static, is it? The policy landscape keeps changing.
Constantly shifting. And recently we've seen proposals that seem to lean more heavily into using the tax code for immigration enforcement.
Like what?
Well, if you connect it to the bigger picture, you see things like the proposed 2025 One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Ideas floated in that vein include things like adding new SSN requirements for tax credits.
Which could impact.
Could impact millions of U.S. citizen children if their parents file with ITNs.
Yeah.
They might lose out on credits they currently qualify for. Other ideas include new taxes on money sent abroad remittances or higher fees for things like asylum applications. Some call these financial walls.
Using financial means as a form of immigration control, basically. Wow. Okay, this has been a really insightful look at how tangled tax and immigration really are.
It's deeply intertwined.
So just to recap, we've sort of unpacked the system where the U.S. demands tax compliance from everyone earning income here, uses the ITN as this vital tool to collect billions, billions, yet at the same time, build in these layers of restriction, excluding those same taxpayers from many key benefits. And we saw how filing taxes, paradoxically, can be a strategic plus for future immigration hopes.
Right, the good moral character aspect.
Even while the broader policy trend might be moving towards using the tax system itself as more of an enforcement mechanism.
It really leaves you with a pretty profound question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, what does it really mean for our society when we rely so significantly on the financial input of a whole group of people that we simultaneously systemically try to exclude? And what are the long-term effects of building these kinds of financial walls, not just for the economy, but for the fabric of our society itself?
That is definitely something to think about. A powerful question to end on.